So I'm taking for granted that all of you read, studied, and memorized the biography of our guest speaker. Somehow, when I was thinking about today's meeting and the state of the world, I was reminded of a book I was assigned to read in graduate school. The thrust of the book is that European history for 1,000 years could be described as a pendulum, swinging back and forth between a tendency toward unification on the one hand and a divisive tendency on the other. Anyway, Dr. Boeckle, I told you that you could talk about anything you wanted to in your address today. That is still true. But I imagine at some point you might have something to say about the war in Ukraine and perhaps what it means for the future of Europe and of the world. Please give him a warm Rotary welcome.
Madam President, lieber Herr David Klaus, dear members, ladies and gentlemen, ganz herzlichen Dank, Herr Klaus, für Ihre einführenden Worte. And thank you very much, Madam President, for the kind invitation to Rotary Club, Washington. It is a privilege for me to discuss with such a renowned circle the state of German-US relationship. Numerous crises and unprecedented global challenges have been testing our resolves in recent years. A new awareness of what contributes to national security has led governments to invest in our armed forces, in strategy, and in alliances. And we saw massive governmental interventions into the economy to direct business affairs and to prescribe people how to protect themselves in the pandemic. Huge amounts of public debt have been accumulated in our countries. Today, we have a new understanding of geopolitics and its implications for our business, for our jobs, for our daily life, for our security. Let me mention 3 trends that have caused this development in recent years. First, the pandemic. The COVID pandemic made clear how dependent from single suppliers and thus how vulnerable we are in our globalized world. A local virus ravaged the world and caused millions of victims. It destroyed supply chains and brought manufacturing to stop. Just-in-time deliveries collapsed, and our over-reliance on India and China in the area of pharmaceutical commodities contributed to the number of victims. Second development, President Putin's unjustified and unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine has eclipsed the international rule-based order as we have known it for decades since the Second World War. It is the biggest change our generation has been living since the unification of Germany, of Europe, the fall of the war. And it has destroyed supply chains. Western countries decouple from Russia politically and economically. We all step up national forces, military, economic, and technological strengths, and we have coordinated sanctions against Russia and support for Ukraine to an extent nobody would have imagined a couple of months ago. We also observe national economic concepts such as reindustrialization, reshoring by Americans that are very much en vogue, very national concepts. New global supply chains are developed that do not necessarily respect traditional rules such as the WTO. Countries in the global south, such as India, South Africa, and Brazil, have not decoupled their traditional economic and political relations with Russia. They rather continue their cooperation with Russia and with the West. And the third observation is the rise of China as a strategic rival in trade and technology makes the reset of international rules extremely complicated. China, with its state-supported investments, a different understanding of human and civil rights, and huge bargaining power, is challenging the principles of the existing international order. And transferring the lesson of Russian aggression to the case of China, many countries engage in a process of restructuring or de-risking their China involvement. Germany and the US are closely coordinating their China de-risking strategies. We are thus observing a breakdown of the existing international order and a trend towards fragmentation of diplomatic relations and of international trade. New forms of coalitions and trade agreements, new political and economic blocs come up either to circumvent Russia and China or to intensify relationship with them. Some speak of a race with China for dominance in markets of the Southern Hemisphere. National economic concepts damage the reliability of the international rules-based system. National concepts of economy entail efficiency losses. And as we have seen with the American Inflation Reduction Act, there are unintended negative consequences for the trade with traditional friends and trading partners. Overall, the trend towards deglobalization and fragmentation is especially worrisome for countries such as Germany, countries whose prosperity highly depends on their integration in international trade and investment. In addition, there is a problem of timing. Climate change forces our countries to accelerate economic transition in energy, digitalization. However, this transformation will result in a much more costly exercise because of the loss of international division of labor, initiated by the ban on Russian gas and oil imports and by the de-risking strategies towards China. And the second timing problem is, I mentioned it, that after the pandemic, most of us, we accumulated massive public debts, which will limit government's margin of maneuver to subsidize energy transition. These developments have massive implications for how we trade, how we maintain our welfare, how we maintain our democratic systems, how we treat our partners in the world, and how we perceive, define, and guarantee our security. Germany's first reflex on the Russian aggression was, we Germans decided to beef up our national military strengths. We decoupled our economy, especially our energy sources, from Russia entirely. Today, we don't import any more coal, gas, or oil from Russia. We went down from 50% of our consumption of energy that came from Russia down to zero nowadays, within very few months. Yeah. Thank you. It costed us a great effort to the households and to the industry. And the third aspect is we enhance transatlantic cooperation. So, we beef up military strength in Germany, decouple our economy from Russia, and we intensify our transatlantic cooperation. That is the essence of the Zeitenwende speech delivered by Chancellor Olaf Scholz in the Bundestag only 3 days after the Russian invasion in February 2022. And indeed, since then, transatlantic unity has intensified more quickly than in any time in recent memory. Germany, the EU, and the United States are cooperating in our support for Ukraine, coordinating arms deliveries, financial and humanitarian support. As partners and allies, particularly in the G7 framework, we have imposed heavy sanctions on Russia. Furthermore, we are more effectively coordinating our economic policies, our China policies, and our outreach towards the global South. This coordination effort over the Atlantic is not a given in view of different economic conditions, different transition strategies on either side of the Atlantic. Today we enjoy a broad and deep transatlantic cooperation. Politically, very intense exchange. Our defense minister will come at the end of this week. Our chancellor will come to Washington in autumn. Our foreign minister is announced to come mid-September. They meet regularly in the meetings of the Rammstein format in Europe. Economically, we have 5,600 German company affiliates here in the United States who create nearly 1 million direct jobs and invest in total so far $650 billion US. And we have a multitude of cultural and academic exchange. With all this transatlantic exchange between Europe and the United States, Germany and the US, we have to be careful not to push away other partners. Countries in the global South, emerging countries like India, South Africa, Brazil, and many others reject a bipolar world order. If we tried to force them to decide between the United States and some allies and China and its allies, we might fail to include them altogether. Any protectionist club led by the West is destined to lose the global South to other competitors like China. And we will be hurting ourselves in the long run. We should not foster a new bipolar bloc mentality. We should rather include countries in the global South and invest in them. We need their cooperation also for global climate protection. Today, the German government has agreed on a new national security strategy. It is a commitment to resilience and national strength, to sustainability, to the North Atlantic Alliance, and to a rules-based international order with including free trade agreements with countries in South America, Africa, and Asia. You see, export trade is extremely important for Germany. The benefits of globalization and interconnectivity are undeniable. They have fueled economic growth and spurred innovation. We want to preserve the positive aspects of globalization while addressing legitimate concerns about national security. And we are determined to harness the transatlantic partnership in order to address the complex global issues we all are facing. Thank you very much. The first question was, how can Germany and the US cooperate on nuclear energy? Look, the cooperation there is very limited because the German government decided to end nuclear energy generation in Germany. And on 15th of April this year, we took off the last reactor from the net. We switched off and ended nuclear energy in Germany. So we still have some know-how, but it's fading out with the fact that we don't use any more nuclear energy in Germany. That is a political decision, and it has been taken under the government of Frau Merkel in 2011, and it has been pursued by the government of Chancellor Scholz, confirmed and implemented. So much to see how much Germans stick to decisions once they have made. Sweden in the NATO? Yes, we hope that Sweden will be now very fast accepted in the NATO. The stumbling block was Turkey, and I think there are signs after the election of President Erdogan. He made signs to make it possible that Turkey enters, and we all hope that for the NATO summit in July, this will happen.
Thank you. There's so many decisions being made by US, China, and many other countries based on national security issues. And as you well know, completely ignoring economic ramifications of those decisions. Do you think this trend is one we'll be stuck with, or will people sober up and reassess in the future?
Look, I analyzed a certain trend to national inward looking, also in the United States, and especially when it comes to the economy. And you know that much better than I do, but I think until the elections in November next year, this trend will rather hold on. At the same time, we have intensive dialogue between the administrations, the German government and the administration of Biden-Harris. And this dialogue, for instance, on the Inflation Reduction Act, has already provided some positive results. For instance, the subsidies are now open also for electric vehicles made by German companies in the United States. There is an exception for commercial vehicles, and a good part of the Mercedes and BMW here are commercial or leased vehicles. So this is very helpful. And we are at the moment working on an agreement on critical minerals, so that when critical minerals that go into the batteries of electric vehicles, critical minerals that are processed in Europe, that this is equally seen as trade relationship with Mexico or Canada. So these cars also can benefit of the subsidies. So we have an excellent, very good and very constructive contact with the administration, and we are finding solutions respecting what Congress passed as a law, but still benefiting that in the implementation phase, there are some areas which are not yet defined. And we are working on these areas in order to keep as much free trade between US and EU as possible.
Thank you for being here today, and I appreciate your overview of world politics. I happen to teach the subject, so I'm going to crib from your notes and lecture. One thing you didn't mention, however, was the recent nuclear saber rattling from the Russians, various spokesmen around Putin and Putin himself. You never mentioned it, and some people are alarmed and think it's an attempt to shatter the consensus that we have in the West regarding the risk in Ukraine. What do you say to those who are worried about this issue and how to counteract it?
There are great efforts to counteract disinformation, also cyber attacks that stem from Russia or other countries. The European Union, they created a special force to counteract And we are in close contact with the administration on this topic. And it's really worrisome. Some new developments in the area of artificial intelligence doesn't make it easier, to detect cyber attacks and disinformation.
I actually wanted to just come back to David's question, which was what's going on with nuclear. It was I'm trained in physics, and it was frustrating for me to watch Germany turning off the last plants, particularly as you're trying to fight on climate side. Can you describe the timeline of it, but can you give me a little bit of insight into the political considerations that were happening starting from 2011 up through pursuing that plan now? I mean,
Yeah. So in 2011, the accident in Fukushima happened. And this was perceived for us Germans the second big accident after Chernobyl 1986. And these two accidents are very much in the memoir and the conscience of Germans. And at that time, in 2011, we had a majority of Germans who said, no, we have to get rid of nuclear energy. It's too dangerous. And, Germany is densely populated. You hardly have 5 miles where nobody lives. And nobody wants the radioactive waste in his front garden. Nobody wants. And up to today, we have not defined the place where the radioactive waste from 50 years, where we can put it. So Germans are very much worried on this topic. And now we have the Green Party in government. Yeah. Scholz has a coalition of 3 parties, the SPD, the Social Democrats, the Liberals, and the Green Party. And the Green Party puts the foreign minister and the economics minister. And the Green Party, they are, after the SPD, the second strongest party in the government. And the DNA, the roots of the Green Party is no nuclear since the 70s. And now they are in the government, and they had the opportunity to stick to that decision of Chancellor Merkel. And they couldn't disappoint their electorate and say, no, we still need the nuclear, let's keep it. And this was politically not possible for the Green Party. So all that we did is we prolonged the nuclear power plants for a couple of months to get over the winter 22-23 to have energy. But then we said, no, we have to do it without nuclear power. We rather use the coal-fired energy plants, even they are disaster for the environment, but we rather do that than we come back on our decision on the nuclear.
Thank you for being here today and sharing, and you had a very comprehensive overview. What would you say would be the 3 top things that we as Americans need to think about in collaborating with Germany and your governments to take us forward beyond the Ukraine and getting into reconstruction, which is hopefully will be sooner than later. But thank you for being here.
Thank you. 3 important things. Well, well, at the moment, of course, we are all thinking of defense. We have to cooperate on defense. The defense market is extremely difficult. Already in Europe, it's very fractured, and there are a lot of companies, and even we Europeans, we are not able, to make the fusions, to agree on maybe only 2 or 3 models of tanks, but each country has its own tank. The French have the Leclerc, we have our Leopard, and the British have another one. And similar to the development of airplanes, of the fighter jets, and the submarines, wherever you go. So to come together and form a transatlantic defense market for goods, that would be a really a huge opportunity to save money and to get a boost in efficiency. But even we Europeans, we have to move, and it's extremely difficult when you ask a politician to give up the company that produces in his constituency in order that the products are produced in France because it's overly more efficient. It's a difficult decision for him. So this is the first one. The second one is climate protection, I would say. In climate protection, we could really intensify our relationship. We Europeans, we use 3 instruments for climate protection. This is market instrument CO2 emission price. So when companies emit carbon dioxide, they have to pay for it. And if they reach a limit of emissions, they have to buy rights to emit carbon dioxide. So this market mechanism has proved in Europe to be very useful. The Americans don't like this idea. There are some in the Congress who say, yeah, it's a good idea. It's a market oriented. It corresponds to our thinking. But so far, it seems like a tax on carbon dioxide. And we know Americans don't like taxes. So this is the first instrument we have, Americans don't have. The second instrument is, ruling, reglementation. We have a lot of reglementation in climate. This makes permitting processes extremely complicated, but it helps the climate. And this reglementation also, Americans, we know they don't like. And that's why the only instruments used here for climate protection, or the main instrument, is subsidies, incentives, like in the Inflation Reduction Act. And these incentives partly come with Buy American, with local content, with restrictions to trade. And if I could wish something now, is that we agree much more on these climate protection instruments. Yeah. And then the third one, I think the third is still people-to-people contacts, bring people together. Yeah, our companies, our academics, students, even do more. Yeah, we think, we know each other's mentality, but you realize it's still there are some differences and some misunderstandings. And when there was this discussion about Nord Stream, we realized that even the German-American relationship is very shaky. It's not so solid as we thought. So people-to-people contacts would be my third one.
Thank you very much for being here, and very insightful presentation. You mentioned Russia, and I thought I heard you say that Germany's pretty much, severed your economic connection with the Russians. And I guess my question is, what are we going to do with Russia? I mean, you can't just throw them out the window, even though we might all like to. I mean, the window's not big enough. Where is the West and Russia going? And is Russia connected with the Chinese? I mean, I know from Marxism they were historically, but I don't know the extent to which they are today.
Yeah. Our Chancellor Scholz, he hesitated long time to deliver weapons, to say that Russia has to lose the war. And he was extremely careful in pushing Russia down, extremely careful over the last 1.5 years. Because I think, because of what you have in mind, Russia will still exist even after the war will exist. And we have to find a deal. Finally, we have to find a diplomatic solutions with Russia. And our objective now is to put Russia in an inferior position at the negotiation table, to give Ukraine as much bargaining chips for these negotiations as possible. That's our objective at the moment. And our government's objective is not to kill Putin or to make him step down. We are very careful with this language because he might be the one who's sitting at the negotiating table, and we might have to talk to him. And even Chancellor Scholz has announced that in the next couple of days he will call him by phone and talk to Putin. So it's not that we cut off all the relationship we have with Russia. And at the same time, we talk to China. And we talk to China for not to deliver weapons to Russia. And so far, we think it has worked. No, China does not deliver lethal weapons to Russia. China, of course, supports Russia with food and with cars, with trucks, but not with lethal weapons. So it's very diplomatically very difficult to maneuver with the two countries at the moment.
My question followed up on what you mentioned about the visit of high-level delegations from Germany, including Chancellor Schröder. So my question is, what are the top topics that you think they will be discussing? What do they want to negotiate to improve those somewhat shaky relations, not as solid as we'd like, between the US and Germany?
The top topics, I think I mentioned it now. First, of course, it's how to support Ukraine in its brave fight against Russia. It's how to deal with China. We agree that there will be no economic decoupling from China. We agree on that. And the United States has adopted the European speech of de-risking our relationship with China. So we do not ask our companies to pull out of China, but we ask everybody to be aware of the risks they have and to try to diversify away from China. But we will not close, BMW will not close, Volkswagen will not close its factories they have in China, and
which are huge.
Really which are good. Huge, yeah.
Yes.
Volkswagen makes 40% of its turnover with China. 40%.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. And BASF, the big German chemical giant, has recently announced an investment of 10 billion euros, $10 billion in China. So they say China is 50% of world market when it comes to plastic, to chemicals, chemical commodities, plastic commodities. We have to be there in this market. And I think there are also some American companies who are still highly engaged in China. But what's on now is a de-risking strategy. So with the United States, yeah, it's what do we do with Ukraine, Russia? How can we work together? How can we even more support Ukraine in order to improve its negotiation situation when the day comes to negotiate? And it's the Ukraine who decides that day. It's not us. It's Ukraine who decides when to sit down and negotiate. It's China and it's climate change. It's climate change. It's our investment also in third countries, in India, in South America, in Africa. How can we support these countries to come from their situation where they are without using coal-fired plants, but go directly to renewables?
Dr. Hardy, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. and our Trees for the Capital program, I am pleased and proud to present you with this certificate signifying our commitment to plant a tree in your honor in our nation's capital. Here we go.